with the renaming of this university, it makes a statement about justice, about rehabilitation, and about reconciliation.
We have this incredible, iconic name of this titan, Tata Madiba.
Advancing Mandela University and achieving our vision of being a great African university in the service of society depends on the leadership that we all display.
We're beginning to explore Mandela as a point of departure. He is a point of departure for making sense of the world which begins outside of European history, outside of a European provenance, outside of European logics.
That figure enables across disciplines an awareness that the purpose of this discipline, of this line of study, these lines of inquiry, this education, this qualification is ultimately about contributing to the making of a just society.
Over the years, the name came to personify the fight against racial discrimination, inequality, and injustice, not only in South Africa, but also globally.
He was able to fit in a whole variety of very disjunctive kinds of contexts. His ability to be able to move from this kind of deep isiXhosa tradition into the extreme cutting edge of modernity. And very few people can do that with a sense of confidence in their own identities, in their own selves.
I think TIMS looks to harness energy, mobilize, be a hub for the broader decolonisation project.
Decolonisation encourages understanding and respect for diverse sociocultural contexts and groups, fostering perspectives that go beyond Eurocentric or Northern worldviews.
So the point about a decolonial point of departure is to think of knowledge, think of understanding, to think of apprehension, comprehension, making sense in ways that don't begin, which is what our default is, I think, in these what we call Eurocentric paradigms, which frame our explanations. Now, that's a really difficult thing to do.
Within a TIMS framing, decolonisation of any kind has to begin with a deep understanding of what the colonial university was all about. And so looking at things like the apparatuses of power which shaped the colonial university, patriarchy and positivism, a deep commitment to serving an elite. And of course, the purpose of a colonial university was very much about serving power, and of course within an imperial kind of framing, serving power. So a decolonial project is all about finding a way of serving those who are disempowered, ultimately.
So what are the practices of using power? There's a very deep question of culture. If you're sitting there and grandfather is using grandfather's ability to say, no, there can't be a war in this village. What is the strategy that is happening there? How are we using power to manage the tensions and conflicts in our institutions?
We have to ask the question as to whether are we creating together as a collective an institutional culture worthy of our university values and our namesake.
When we are sitting here at this institution, which has all the hallmarks of everything, right? I mean, if you don't know, this was a right-wing institution of the highest order. And today, 80% of the students are black, and Nomalanga can come and tell you things, right?
You know, I'd like to think that a project like this is going to come to bring people to a very much more open-minded hospitality about their own pasts, their own complexities, and not this kind of utter dogmatism, and which determines the ways in which people come to language, to self-description, to explanation, which is very much, how our politics is performed. It's performed in the languages and vocabularies of a particular characterization of what this normative order thinks is right.
This understanding is crucial for addressing contemporary African and global challenges and fostering dialogue across sociocultural, economic, and geographical divides. By validating and integrating diverse knowledge systems, decolonization empowers the previously colonized and marginalized and validates their ways of knowing, which were historically elided, dismissed, and actively suppressed. If these points are borne in mind, it should be evident why and how university communities can play a role in decolonization processes.
The university would really want to be a specialist in that space and ensuring that those longer, deeper knowledges are infusing the work of the university and are inspiring and shaping the work of decolonization in all kinds of ways.
And the important thing about the decolonial project is to be open to the possibility that you might learn something out of those logics. As these new universities come into being, they come into being essentially around a kind of contradictory mission. And that mission is to explore the boundaries of knowledge, but at the same time, they are yoked to the states in which they find themselves. And those states essentially come to think of these institutions as sites for being able to deepen their own political power.
My fear about transformation is always sustainability. How do we sustain this beautiful feature that we've created ourselves and the pressure that we have created for performing nationally? How do we move from the individual commitment that this beautiful transformative feature depends on to make it structural? Because my fear is that when the harsh economic times hit us, the first thing that we tend to toss out of the window, it could be that feature. I think let's be protective of that feature, the transformative blood system of Mandela and how to sustain it within the architecture of the university. And it's one of the most productive features of our university.
It has always been argued that transformation is the underlying fourth mandate or fourth mission of the university that supports learning and teaching, research and engagement towards an inclusivity and equity worthy of our country's history. And we have a clear roadmap for this journey that is reflected in our ITP.
I think it's really important for anybody within a Mandela space, anyone locating themselves, an institution locating itself in relation to Mandela, the name and the figure, is to acknowledge that that name is indelibly connected to the dualism of modernity and its positivism. And a challenge, and it's a challenge of a conceptual challenge. It's in the realm of ideas, but then of course there's a praxis dimension to it as well. Is that what is beyond that? What is beyond modernity? You know, there was post-modernity, which arguably has not worked very well for the academy, for humanity. But what is the beyond? And this is the more precise question. What perhaps is the beyond Mandela? What does that look like? I think some of the post-structuralist thinkers, the thinkers of deconstruction, have argued that one path towards that beyond is going back, reconnecting with ancient wisdoms. And for a university like Nelson Mandela University, exploring those longer histories of Southern Africa, of the Eastern Cape, the histories before European colonization, what sometimes is called indigenous knowledges.
It is important that we simultaneously also consider the epistemic and social possibilities of the African University in relation to a myriad of emancipatory futures. There are various ways in which universities currently effectively discourage and even disallow alternative developmental paths for both the subjects of universities and universities themselves, which serve to conserve and perpetuate old privilege.
I have to, in my own life, constantly be aware of how racial conceit works. But I am embedded in European ways of thinking, European logics, particularly European science. And that science, essentially comes out of Descartes, Kant, the Enlightenment, culminating in the work of people like Hegel and so on, where the major proposition comes to a climax with the birth of the modern university in Berlin with Humboldt around about the 1830s, with the proposition that facts are objective, neutral, freestanding signifiers which science is able to empirically prove.
And then it poses some questions for us about our posture and about our ambition to engage with those precarities and with those diversities and with those strengths that our new body of students are bringing to this university.
Decolonisation is, for me, simply a stand-in word here now for good critical education. So all of our dominant ways, sociological ways, psychological frameworks come out of a European set of frames. And just talking in ontological terms, those sets of frames are about solidarities, about connections, which take terms like family, tribe, community, nation, in very particular kinds of ways. Now, in our exploration, I think we need to begin to think of possibilities where we can understand all of those things of connection, of human connection, in different vocabularies, different discursive sense-making frames than the ones that we have access to.
I think also another reality is what more radical thinkers might call the corporatization of the academy. I mean, these are realities, funding and working in partnership with the private sector. These are all areas of challenge, areas of opportunity, but also of concern.
What a good critical education is going to do is always going to be nurturing and cultivating this capacity for a sense of not simply cynicism, but a caution in looking over one's shoulder, looking backwards and understanding just what that process of self-formation is all about.
For me, there are two primary roles for the broader university community in relation to continuing decolonization work. And the one has to do with accountability, is holding those who are driving these processes, those who are currently within university space, those who are especially decision makers, holding them accountable, keeping them honest in these processes. The other role would be to be contributing to that continuing imperative that this decolonization work is always informed by a commitment to wherever we are, whoever we are, is freeing ourselves, liberating our minds from this most pernicious of all forms of colonization, which is that colonization of the mind. Going back to Black consciousness and Biko is liberating ourselves. That's a continuing task. And it's a task that can't only be done by faculty, can't only be done by administrators, can't only be done by the communities who are in partnership with the university. It has to be done by all of us.
But we are a university, and as we may well know, philosophically speaking, the main task of educational institutions is the generation of hope.
The name Mandela signifies within that kind of framing that you see the journey to its end. You don't give up. You never give up.